Lori Vallow Daybell has been convicted in the deaths of her two children, 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. She has also been found guilty in conspiring to kill Tammy Daybell, her fifth husband's previous wife. The verdict comes nearly 3 years after the children's bodies were discovered in the backyard of the home of Vallow Daybell's husband, Chad Daybell. I'm Stephanie Haney, and in this edition of In the News Now, we're going to look into the Lori Vallow Daybell case, including the new charges she faces in Arizona, as well as hear reaction from family members and jurors. We begin with the closer look at the guilty verdict handed down in Idaho. Here's Crem's Amanda Rowley.
Lori Vallow is accused of killing her two children and the former wife of her husband, Chad Daybell. She was facing 6 criminal charges for the crime. In order to be found guilty of first-degree murder, the jury had to determine Vallow killed, commanded someone to kill, and/or encouraged the killing of the victims, and it had to be unanimous. The jury spent about 6 hours deliberating, with 39 jury instructions to consider before reaching a decision. That decision came in just before 11 a.m. Then the court gave everyone an hour to return to court for the verdict.
All right, please.
The jury found Vallow guilty of all 6 charges.
Is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty.
As they read through each count, Vallow gave no reaction to any of the guilty verdicts.
First-degree murder of Tylee Ryan. Answer, guilty.
The next step is Vallow's sentence hearing, which the judge says won't be held for another 3 months. The death penalty is no longer on the table for Vallow. That's because of a judge order for late discovery submissions that happened before the trial.
Lori now faces up to life in prison. The judge says she could be sentenced within the next 3 months. For the families of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy, the guilty verdict came after more than 3 years of waiting, prayers, and tears. KTV's Shira Matsuzawa spoke with JJ's grandparents, Tylee's aunt, and Lori's uncle about the outcome of the trial.
For the families of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy, Friday's guilty verdict was more than 3 years of waiting, prayers, and tears.
Thank y'all, thank y'all, thank y'all.
JJ's grandparents, Kay and Larry Woodcock, talked with media moments after the verdict came down.
We are elated with this.
I want to personally hug every one of those jurors.
While the Woodcocks were in court when that verdict was read, many relatives were also watching from across the country. Family members like Tylee's aunt, Annie Cushing.
I was just absolutely over the moon.
Annie was in court the first couple of weeks of the trial and sat just feet away from Lori.
I was surprised by how I felt when I saw her. Like, I was expecting more rage and just like, how dare you? But she looked like an animal caught in a trap. I walked away with the realization she also took herself down. She lived a charmed, privileged life, and she threw it all away.
Lori's uncle, Rex Connor, had a similar experience when he attended the trial on 2 separate occasions.
You make eye contact with Lolo, and you have that faint smile, well, we knew the person that preceded you. When you make eye contact, I don't feel like we know this person. I don't speak with Lori, but my sister Janice, her mother, does every week. And, when I'm talking with Janice, she just relays Lori is still in her delusion.
Do you have a message for Lori?
I've thought through, if there's anything I would want to say to her. It would fall on deaf ears. She's a psychopath. She has no concern whatsoever about the pain and suffering she's caused other people.
And it's that pain that makes the guilty verdict they've been waiting for still wrapped in sadness, because it doesn't bring the kids back.
It's the most bittersweet you can imagine. Just the sadness, but the relief from all this is I guess, a liberating feeling. I do believe since it's Mother's Day weekend, this is what you call poetic justice.
We are so grateful that for everyone that has come in contact with this story. And here's why. You can think of all of the news stories, all of the situations in the world that we see reported, and aren't most of them divisive? There are millions of people now that are aware of it, that are following it, that care about it, and we're all on the same side. We all want justice for Tylee and JJ, and for Tammy and for Charles.
I forgot one of the most important things. JJ, I love you. Papa wish you were here in other circumstances. Tylee, Papa loves you. Tammy, I never met you. Tammy, you are part of our life.
For 5 weeks, 18 men and women, the 12 jurors and 6 alternates, listened to horrific testimony in the trial. We go back now to KTVB's Shira Matsuzawa now, who spoke with one of the jurors. That juror shared what she experienced sitting in that courtroom.
It's been an incredibly surreal experience for me. It was just so bizarre. It was almost like, one of those little puzzles with 1,000 pieces in it, and you're putting, little pieces together slowly.
What was the hardest part for you personally?
I think just being a mom, and not being able to understand how anybody could, do that to their own children. It was so hard for me. I can't even comprehend what goes through somebody's mind to harm a child. I just can't.
I know you as a juror saw such graphic testimony, and there were some, horrific photos. What was that like to be presented with all that?
One of the questions they asked us, in our questionnaire in the selection process was, you're going to be shown autopsy photos. Is this something that you think that you could, be okay with? And I checked, yeah, sure, I think so. But it was, it wasn't. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. But I know that I needed to do it, to be able to bring justice to those kids, because, they didn't have a say in it. I just feel like I had more emotion than she did, and the only time I saw her have emotion was when she saw a picture of JJ. She, kissed her lips and it just went like that. It just felt like so not sincere to me.
For you personally, how did you just prepare yourself for this?
I'm not really sure I did prepare myself, How can one prepare themselves to see what we saw?
How does that make you feel to kind of watch her and see this lack of emotion?
Inhuman? That's what I feel like. The rest of us are crying, emotions, nothing. It just almost seemed like she was inhuman.
Now that it's over, have you looked up at the media or any of this stuff to kind of fill in the holes?
I have. I felt like there was a lot of holes, mainly what happened to Alex Cox. We never knew. I didn't know what happened to him. Where is he at? Melanie Boudreau, where's she at?
And even though Tiffany didn't deliberate, she still feels like she was an important part of the process.
At first, I was extremely disappointed that my number got drawn, even though I knew that was going to be a possibility. But after hearing about the deliberations, I really feel that it's not that I didn't miss out on anything, but I just feel like they voted, or not voted, but they found her guilty of the charges that I would have.
While Lori awaits sentencing in Idaho, she is now facing 2 more murder conspiracy charges in Arizona. KPNX's Erica Stapleton has more on those charges.
We knew that Lori Vallow Daybell was facing a charge out of Chandler in the death of her former husband, Charles Vallow. But now that a new indictment's been unsealed, we can confirm she's facing another conspiracy to commit murder charge for allegedly trying to kill her niece's ex-husband out of Gilbert, who, unlike other victims, is still alive.
911, where's your emergency?
Someone just shot my window.
A drive-by shooting in a Gilbert neighborhood in October 2019.
They just drove off. I saw them drive off.
Brandon Boudreau calling 911 after a bullet shattered the driver's side window as he was about to pull into his driveway.
Heard a bang. My window shattered.
At the time, investigators didn't know that this shooting would ultimately lead them to Lori Vallow Daybell, her husband Chad, and brother Alex Cox.
It's just horrifying to think that they had this belief that they could just kill people.
Private investigator Rich Robertson was first hired to investigate by Brandon Boudreau. He followed the case as it revealed a string of deaths from Arizona to Idaho. Just last week, a jury convicted Lori Vallow Daybell in the murders of her 2 kids, Tylee and JJ, who investigators believe were killed in September 2019. She was also convicted for conspiring to kill her latest husband, Chad Daybell's first wife, Tammy, in October 2019. After Lori is sentenced in Idaho, where she faces life in prison, prosecutors hope to extradite her back to Arizona to face 2 conspiracy charges. One in the death of her former husband, Charles Vallow, after her brother shot him dead at their Chandler home in July 2019. The second in that October 2019 shooting at Brandon Boudreau.
The belief is that Lori's brother, Alex, was the trigger man.
In 2019, Brandon Boudreau was going through a divorce with Lori and Alex's niece, Melanie. Court documents from the matter gave the first glimpse into the dark religious beliefs tied to Lori, Alex, Chad, and others in their tight circle, like bodies being taken over by zombies. Brandon declined to talk with 12 News for this story, but he did testify in Lori's murder trial in Idaho, talking about the attempt on his life and Lori's darkening beliefs.
It just kind of got more bizarre.
Other filings indicate that Lori's niece Melanie thought it was possible Lori and Chad could have directed Alex to shoot at Brandon. Melanie is not charged in any case.
It really goes to conspiracy cases now. How did somebody like Lori get Alex to do those crimes?
Alex Cox died at his home in Gilbert in December 2019, before any charges were filed in any of these cases. Chad is facing his own murder trial in Idaho in the deaths of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy, likely sometime next year. Gilbert police submitted Chad for charges in the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreau, but MCAO declined to prosecute, only bringing the case against Lori.
Now, as I mentioned before, the judge in the Idaho case expects that sentencing for Lori will happen later this summer. A Maricopa County attorney in Arizona says after that sentencing, she'll be extradited to Arizona. We'll be keeping an eye on both of these cases as this all plays out. Thanks for watching this edition of In the News Now. I'm Stephanie Haney.